All right, everybody, how are you? I want to help some of you. I've gotten a lot of questions about how we define what a word class is in a language, and I want to maybe just define what a word class is and then show you how to go about getting word classes. I put some data up here on the video that I've taken from Tom Paine's book called Exploring Language Structure. This is a great book. It gives you lots of data. Um, and I find that the concept of a word class is pretty easy for students to get, but perhaps the application of it is more difficult. And so I want to give you both here. So let me just choose a pen color really quick. So what we're going to do then is we're first going to define a word class. Oh, let me stop doing that. Let me turn the pen on here. There we go. So a word class is a linguistic phenomena. What it means is a grouping of grouping of a set of words based on certain linguistic grammatical properties. It could be morphological, it could be syntactic, it could be semantic, and each of these has different values. So it's a group of words. So when you're looking for word classes, you're just finding different ways to group words. So in this problem set, when we get to it, Tom has given us 11 words over here, and our goal is to find how to group these words. Okay, so we are just focusing on these 11 words. Now, the way you find out what the groups are, you follow some parameters. There's the semantic parameters. That is based on meaning. Okay, the words that mean something similar in a very abstract and general sense. Those belong in the same group. So this is what we did in elementary school, actually, at least in the English-speaking world, where we said something like nouns are person, places, and things, and ideas, right? This is a way to group these sets of words based on meaning. Okay. Another way is to find morphological similarities, and this, morphological. And morphological refers to what kind of bound morphemes they can take. If a word, a set of words can all take the same morpheme, we say they behave the same, and that's evidence that they belong in the same group. So, for example, in English, a set of words can take the s suffix, which means the plural. So cats, dogs, couches, right? These belong in a group because they can all take similar morphology. Okay. And three, we can look at distribution or syntax. Okay, within a phrase or a clause, where do these words go? So nouns, for example, in English can mostly be subjects or direct objects. The verbs can be the heads of a predicate, verb phrase. So what we're hoping to do then with these three categories is look at the properties of each word and then determine what the class belongs to. Now, there could be overlap between these three groupings, three criteria, or it could be clearly distinct, right? So you're going to have to come at the data knowing that these three things are the things you should pay attention to and not get bogged down. I tell all my students that the most important thing is morphology. I think that semantics is really unreliable when you're grouping words together unless you can have support from one of the other two. So I tell my students to look for the morphological evidence first, and then if there isn't any of that, look for syntax, or if there's syntax and morphology, first do morphology and then look at syntax. So over here in this group of words, what we want to do is figure out how these 11 words over here that he gave us at the very top, how they belong in a group. Okay, and we're going to pay attention to the morphology and syntax, and if necessary, we'll pay attention to the semantics, but at first we won't, though you can. So this is a list of 43 pieces of data about how you use these 11 words, and in the textbook, if you have Tom Paine's textbook, there's actually 76 pieces of data about these words. And that will give us information about their different behaviors, semantic, morphological, and syntactic behaviors. Okay, so what the first thing you need to do is do something called like a low-level analysis and figure out where the morphemes are and what the positions within a phrase or position in relation to other things these 11 words are. So let me change the pen color really quick. I'm going to change it to blue. Good. So the first word here is Ioni, right? I'm kind of squinting at the screen, but maybe you can see it. And in the directions, it tells us that enk is a feminine gender prefix. So we have enk, and then ioni, right? And these have tones, so it's ioni. But we had to do a morphological break first, or morphological analysis. So remember that morphemes are separated by hyphens, and so we can gloss this as feminine class, and this one is, and this was one of the 11 words we're looking at, and this one means boy. Now don't get lost, because some of you will say, well, it's a boy, how can it be feminine, right? Grammatical gender is about word classes. It's not about anatomical gender. What we mean by feminine class in a language is just mean group A or group B. And because of tradition and where our linguistic tradition came from, we call one feminine and one masculine, or maybe even one neuter, and other classes depending on what languages you work on. But it's not about anatomical gender. Okay, so this boy, this word boy, we find out takes the feminine prefix. Okay. Now, if we go through the rest of the data, we'll find some very interesting things. So in the next piece of data, we have this, which we're told is the masculine prefix, and it's also on ioni. Okay. So what we're seeing is that that boy, the word boy, this one word that we're trying to look up at the top here, it can take either the feminine prefix or the masculine. So let me gloss this really quick. This is masculine, and it's boy. Okay. So we found something very interesting about this, and so we'd go through and we want to do the same thing for the rest of the data. Do a morphological analysis, find the morphemes, find the positions within the word for all these different things. Now, what you come out with is a list of morphological and syntactic information. So, for example, we'll call one criteria. It can take the feminine prefix, and we'll call another one called take the masculine prefix. Okay, and there's a lot of ways you can do the analysis. It depends on your morphological analysis, and so there was never one right answer about the way you group word classes. You just look for the most right answer, the one that has the most support according to the data. So we can make a table, and oops, let's control that out. And so we have two categories, or two criteria. Those that can take the feminine prefix, and those that can take the masculine prefix. Okay. Let's see some other things in this data that if you looked through would be something like can take the relativizer. There's an N or NO prefix or an A prefix. I can't remember. I have to look through all the data. And this is seen in example. For example, let's see, where is it? Right there in 20. A girl that is dirty. So the word that, which is a subordinate, which is a relative clause, that is dirty, is marked by this N prefix or NA prefix. Okay. So we can see that sometimes that occurs with that. A little bit of the syntactic information. Let me squeeze that in here. Let me scoot over just a little bit here. So some of our syntactic information, we find out that after very. So if it can be preceded by the word very, which is one of the words we're looking for. So which is oleng. So if it can be preceded by oleng. Okay. So we look through and we find a bunch of morphological and syntactic evidence. In this data set, I think there's about 8 or 9 pieces of data criteria that help determine word classes. Now we're ready to determine word classes. So we have the criteria which help us determine what class a word belongs to, and then we list the 11 words that were the original 11 words. Let me go back over here. The original 11 words that we are interested in over there, okay? So we'll list those, and we put those just down here. So one of those words is aioni, right? And we just mark yes or no for each one of these things. So can it take a feminine prefix? Well, we see over here that it can, so we'll mark it yes. Can it take a masculine prefix? Yes, it can. Can it take the na prefix? And if we go through the data, throughout all the pieces of data, we see that it never occurs with that, and so we say no. Can it be preceded by very, this word oleng? And it never can. Okay. Another word in this data set, one of the 11 words, is do, which means red. Okay, and we have to see if this fits, how this fits with our criteria. So red, this word is never shown with a feminine prefix and never shown with a masculine prefix, but it is shown with this relativizing prefix. If we look through it, I'm pretty sure it's showed with the very, though I can't remember the data right off the top of my head. Okay, so we would do this and we'd list only the 11 words that we're looking for. So we have do, and then dung, and then nyor, and niro, right, and so on. And then we mark each one, and then we look at these and determine, based on these parameters, what the class is, how to group these words. Okay, so it's only about those 11 words, and we would see, for example, in the ones that we did, we see that aioni and do, they are completely opposite of each other, right? And because they have different morphological behaviors and syntactic behaviors, we can put these in two different groups, right? So we'll have group 1 let me actually change the color so this doesn't get confusing. I'm going to change it to green here. So we have group 1. Oh, that was weird. Group 1, and it'll be the aioni words. Okay, so all the words that pattern just like aioni will belong in this group. And then all the words that pattern like do would be in group 2. It would be do, right? And of course, you have all 11 words, and you have all 9 criteria, morphosyntactic criteria, and you can group these things. The names of the groups are largely arbitrary. Okay, we could call them cherry pie, we could call them whatever. We use the semantic information, however, to help us get the names. So if we were to look at all the words that belong in group 1, what do they have in common semantically? Okay, they seem to be, based on this very simple analysis, right? These ones seem to be, they can take noun classes, and they have to do with person, places, or things. And these others, this group 2, can't take noun classes, and it can be varied, right? It's about description or qualities, right? So we have group 1, and I'm going to call this group 1. I'm just going to call it nouns. I could easily call it stable things. I could call it, like I said, cherry pie. I could name it smiley face. It doesn't really matter, the name, as long as we understand what that word noun means. And the whole point of this is to realize that nouns don't exist in any language. They only exist if we can define them first, right? So then a noun in English is different than a noun in, say, Japanese or Quechua or whatever, right? And we can only say what a noun is in each of those languages if we define it first, okay? And this one I'm going to call adjectives because they seem to be most like English adjectives. So we have 2 groups, nouns and adjectives, okay? And as you go through this data, let me go back to the blue here. You'll find that some of the words are very similar, but none of them are exact. So, for example, tito is another word. So we put tito. That's the very last word. It means girl. Oh, that's a really bad line here. I'm getting kind of messy with my lines. And we have to find out if it can take the feminine prefix, and we can take both the feminine prefix and the masculine prefix on this, okay? But it can't take the N, just like the word for boy, and it can't use very, but there are some other things that maybe distinguish Tito from Ione, and so then we say, well, look, they have one thing, or they have most of their things in common, but there's one thing that is different, right? And so then we can talk about subclasses, right? If most of the criteria are common, they belong to the same group, we'll call it nouns. But then if one thing is different, they might have something else, a subclass. And so we can name those subclasses. So we can talk about feminine nouns or masculine nouns, or state verbs versus action verbs, okay? So we're just looking at the morphological data, and we are trying to determine how the 11 words in this problem, or whatever words we're looking at, how they are grouped together according to that information. Right. Let me know if you have any questions.